Hey everyone, Ian here, popping in with a brief introduction to the interview you're about to see with Crispin Hellion Glover. You know him as a quirky character actor from classics like Back to the Future, River's Edge, and of course as Jimmy in Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, but he's also the definition of an independent filmmaker. Earlier this month, he attended a press screening of his latest film entitled No, You're Wrong, or Spooky Action at a Distance. I would need several hours and a couple of rewatches to describe this film beyond this likely very inaccurate analogy. It's like There Will Be Blood meets Cloud Atlas set in a land of make believe. Afterwards, I sat down with Crispin in the Music Box Theater lounge for a fascinating conversation that ranged from his refusal to distribute his movies digitally, to his friendship with the late great David Lynch, to the origins of surrealism, and how his famous Back to the Future Part 2 lawsuit predicted Hollywood's battle with AI more than 3 decades ago. And yes, you heard that right. Crispin Glover doesn't make his films available digitally, be it streaming or on disc. So if you want to see No, You're Wrong or Spooky Action at a Distance, you'll need to catch him on tour at an art house theater near you. Fortunately for Chicagoans, he's coming back to the Music Box Theater this week, where he'll host a screening of this film on Thursday night and the new film in which he stars called Mr. K on Wednesday night. The Thursday show will be including a pre-screening presentation by Crispin Glover that you will not want to miss, and there'll be an extensive Q&A and a book signing after the feature. You can get tickets and more info in the description below. If you enjoy this episode, please like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and all that business. And until next time, whenever that is, whatever that is, thank you very much and take care. I'm going to start off with a confession.
Okay.
I have not seen the other films that you have written and
That's-
directed. So
That happens a lot, actually, because I've never put them out digitally. So it's a conundrum because just the way that I distribute, uh, well, there's a whole bunch of reasons I've never put them out digitally, and it's good that I haven't, but it of course makes it difficult because that's the way a lot of people end up seeing things, and it ends up happening so that people kind of need to see it projected in the movie theater, like we just saw this film, which is of course what it's intended for. But it's a strange thing because I've spent so much of my life with my filmmaking, but that's not mostly what people, mostly people know me from acting, because that's been digitally distributed for a long time. So it's a strange thing because really the filmmaking is where my mind. I mean, when I'm acting in something, I put 100% into it, but my life really has been about my filmmaking for quite some time now.
So why not put it out digitally?
Well, there's multiple reasons. The first film, just to be clear, the new film, No, You're Wrong, or Spooky Action at a Distance, is not part 3 of the It trilogy. But parts 1 and 2 of the It trilogy, What Is It, which was my first film, and It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine, which was my second film. Well, there's a thematic element going on in those two films, which is not the thematic element that's in this new movie. Particularly, What Is It was constructed as it took stages in its construction, but it was constructed as almost a thesis statement on the corporate constraints that happen within filmmaking, and what that ends up having impact on in our culture. But when I was editing the film, What Is It, which started out as a short film to promote what would be part 3 of the It trilogy, which David Lynch had agreed to executive produce for me to direct. Weirdly, and I'm
No.
not finishing a thought, but there's two thoughts here, because since I mentioned David Lynch, I'd been planning to talk about this, and of course, sadly, earlier this year, David Lynch died. But he had a biography slash autobiography that came out a number of years ago. One chapter he would write, and then the next chapter Christine McKenna would write. She had asked me to write something for that, which I did. But when I read it, David Lynch wrote that he had produced What Is It? Well, he did. I mean, the proper term would have been executive produced. Had I known he thought that, when I premiered What Is It in Sundance, it would have been David Lynch presents Crispin Hellion Glover's What Is It? But what happened was, I didn't have the finished cut of What Is It? But it was, all of my films have taken enormously long, particularly this new film. And so it was probably about 1998. I went to David Lynch's house. Well, the one that's up for sale. There's several of them, but it was, I think, the one in the middle of them. But and we sat and watched the cut of What Is It at that time. It's not the final. It was not the final cut of the film. And he chain smoked and watched the film. And at the end, he said, "I dig it. I dig it. I dig it." And but he didn't say, I want to executive produce this movie, which is sort of what I was wanting to get a gauge on when I went. But the thing is he and I didn't have a formal contract. And David Lynch is great. I mean, I'm so honored and grateful that I knew him, and got to work with him. And well, he's not particularly verbal in certain ways, but it's like what's going on in his head. He's great, but it's not a necessarily about words. It's more about the idea somehow. Anyhow, and I'm not necessarily particularly always that precise. In a certain way, I'm very precise with what I say, but in other ways, I'm thinking about different things, and maybe something doesn't come through as clearly. Anyhow, what I realized in of course, after I read it, what I realized in retrospect was he thought, when I showed him What Is It, that was It Is Mine, the movie he'd agreed to executive produce.
Oh.
Because he's thinking, who knows how carefully he read the one script. They both had similar thematic elements.
And it's in the title, yeah.
What Is It? It Is Mine. There are sentences. So, and I communicated with him after that. It became clear there was no bad feeling or anything. There was always a good feeling, but I've been, planning to talk about it, and then he died earlier this year. So anyhow, so that came up in the midst of while I was saying something else. What I was saying before was, so What Is It had. It dealt in taboo subject matter. And I was in the middle of editing it. Well, in the midst of editing, the short film of What Is It was to promote a concept. Well, I have to backtrack again. So when David Lynch had agreed to executive produce it, for me to direct, I went to one of the, it was the kind of the go-to um, film production company in the 90s. This was 1995 or 6. 95, I think 95. And they were interested because David Lynch was involved. I had a number of actors of name value that were interested in it. But after a number of meetings and conversations, they were concerned that about funding a film where a majority of the characters were to be played by actors with Down syndrome, because that was something that was in that It Is Mine script. And then it was decided, not with David Lynch, but it was decided that I should write a short screenplay to promote that this was a viable idea.
Okay.
I wrote a 20-something page screenplay and I decided I'll make all of the actors have Down syndrome. Make it so all of the characters that were to be played by actors with Down syndrome, but the characters do not necessarily have Down syndrome. Anyhow, when I showed it to that company, it's a funny thing. You can only see. I just had the premiere of this film that we just watched at the Museum of Modern Art a couple of Friday, whatever day it is. So we're on Monday, which was I was very pleased with the reception, and you can only. It was the first time I'd shown it to an audience. I'd shown it to individual filmmaker friends and friends of mine, and got unique perspectives. But there is a difference when it's hundreds of people watching it together, and I was pleased. There were things that I didn't necessarily know would play. Even today, there were a few people, but you could hear there were people laughing at which on my first film there are elements of humor within it, but some of the humor if I see that film with audience, I'm not always there. I've seen people say that I'm always sitting in the audience, which is not true. I wanted to, because I haven't seen this film projected. There's a beautiful screen here with the music box, so it was enjoyable to watch it. In What Is It, sometimes the audience will laugh at things that I find humorous. Sometimes they'll laugh at things I don't find humorous. But there are many times that I laugh when the audience is definitely not laughing. But that's partly because what I find amusing is I know that the audience is extremely uncomfortable, which is the film was designed that way. Now, this film wasn't designed that way. And so what's pleasing is that what people are laughing with in the film are things that I also found amusing. So it's different from the first film. I wasn't intending it to be out loud laughter, because it certainly wouldn't call this a comedy. But I did think those places that people are laughing are amusing. So I kind of thought it would be a internal kind of laugh, but people were laughing out loud, which was good. But so when when I was editing What Is It, there were multiple filmmakers I was watching and thinking about, mostly Louis Buñuel, essentially the father of surrealist cinema. There are other cinema filmmakers, but he's great. And I was reading his autobiography, My Last Sigh, and kind of a sister book to that, published around the same time, called In Conversations with Louis Buñuel. So I was editing. What is it? I taught myself editing with Adobe Premiere, which I still use. I edited this film with it, and I was I was very interested with how he said, and I believe him. I don't think he's lying. How he said that he did not put meanings in the surrealists had games that they would make it so there were disparate pieces of information or visual imagery or words, what have you, that would not necessarily connect, but it was randomized in a way. So things could be irrational to get on some level to the subconscious, or really to get the what I would describe the most important thing is it lets the audience have engagement on their own. They are putting the information together. And Buñuel was really specific about saying he did not put interpretations on these disparate images that were put together. I believe it's true. When I was editing What Is It, I couldn't help but put my own thought processes in, but I'm careful when I do the Q&As at the shows that I put things in context, but I don't say what it is that people should be thinking.
That's fascinating because I watched, even outside of art
This
films.
isn't Coca-Cola, it's water.
Oh, okay. And it's not sponsored, so. But watching movies outside of even independent cinema, sometimes I see vagaries and things that are left open to interpretation. And I sometimes wonder, and I feel like I can spot, when there's a filmmaker who is putting ambiguity in because they just want to try and get away with something,
Yeah.
versus someone who has an idea of what they want to say. They've got it all figured out, but they're inviting the audience to
Yeah.
interpret it on their own.
Yeah.
And that's definitely a feeling I got
Good.
with Know You're Wrong.
Good.
I think there's some
Or
overt
spooky action.
or spooky action at a distance, which I assume that is a real Einstein quote. I have not read that.
I'm not sure that he coined the phrase. How I put it in the film is that he knew about it.
Oh, okay.
Somebody else might have coined it, but he's the go-to physicist that everybody's familiar with.
Well,
Might have been. No, it doesn't matter. But go ahead. Yeah.
well, no, I do admire that in a filmmaker who has all the answers, or at least has an idea of where things should lie, and then kind of breaks it up into a puzzle to not give everything to the audience. I think that's a great way to keep the audience engaged. Now, and also in terms of this film, I think it demands a second viewing because you're just kind of being thrown all of this information and all these characters who are played by just a couple of people across 80 years. You deserve a medal, I think, if you come out of this the first time getting all of it.
Right. I doubt there are things that I know that are in the film that are so specific to my own head that which doesn't matter. It's fine that it's that way. There's no way anybody would know what it is that I'm referring to or referencing or thinking about, but it's a real thing. So my feeling is the idea, hopefully, is that people will get a feeling, which is the more important thing, and then ascribe whatever that feeling is to whatever the information is in front of them to have their own interpretation. Which that on that level that works. And what to me the most important things that the Surrealists did was to bring in the audience's own cognition, their own putting together of information to have the ideas, which brings in ideally a genuine experience at some time.
I want to talk about it because something that it's impossible to ignore because it keeps coming up in text in the film about your father, Bruce, passed away earlier this year in March. We also lost David Lynch, who was a very important figure to you. The themes of generational violence and loss and even art imitating life or art affecting life are there. I don't want to, don't feel like you need to reveal anything too personal, but did the story change after the events of losing those two important people? Did you go back and recontextualize anything, or is it just a spooky coincidence that the things you laid out happen to play out in real life?
It's there's one line, audio line that was added after my father died. The theme or that particular title, it's both explained on some level in the film and also left unexplained purposefully. But yes, specifically my father dying before the film came out, I was trying to get the film done. I knew in the last couple of years, I knew my father's health was of questionable element. I was trying very hard to get the film done because there were things in the film that it's part of what that title is about. But yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's strange to me. It's spooky to me, so to speak. And spooky, of course, why it was called spooky action at a distance. Like I say, I actually don't think it was Einstein who coined it. But the idea is what's spooky about it, because the constant, supposedly the fastest thing in the universe, what is it? E = mc squared, energy. Times mass times light is squared. So I should know this, but
I'll put it up on the title.
C, I believe C is. Let's see. This is embarrassing. E is energy equals mass times light. I think C is light squared. So that's a constant. The speed of light is a constant, which is supposed to be the fastest speed, but it's also called entanglement, the spooky action at distance. So obviously I'm not a physicist, but it's always been, it's one of the most fascinating things in physics. But what's spooky is, what the idea is that there, which I kind of described briefly in the film, there's two particles that get energetically attached in some fashion, and the concept is they could be this far apart or across the universe, and they would consistently move in a
sort of parallel,
entangled way.
Yeah,
and which means that's way faster than the speed of light. So that's what's spooky. That's the spooky action at a distance, that's nobody can explain it currently. Who knows? There's so many bizarre things that we anyhow. So in the film, there's a bit of a poeticness to it, but like I say, I shouldn't say too much because it starts to lose its value. I should finish what I was starting to say about not putting things out digitally, because most of the actors in the film, have Down syndrome. But again, they're playing characters that do not necessarily have Down syndrome, which is what, after I made the short film, and I realized that what the corporation that I took it to, I was naively thinking what they meant was they were concerned about the viability of it, that it would be difficult to do.
To engage audiences with?
No, just I was naively thinking they were concerned about having actors with Down syndrome playing characters, and it just would be a difficult production. That's why I shot the short film, where I made all of in the original short film. It became expanded into the feature, but originally I had, in the short film, it was all of the characters being played by actors with Down syndrome, and those characters did not necessarily have Down syndrome. But what I later realized was, after I made the short film, when I first cut it together, was 82 minutes. The final film is 72 minutes. I ended up shooting 8 more days on it. It was shot in 12 days, but over a series of years. But what I realized was that what the corporation was concerned about was not the viability. It was about questions that people would ask, like, why are you doing this? Are you making fun of these people? Are you taking advantage of these people? Which was, no way would I be interested in that. I've seen people write that. They automatically think I'm doing something terrible. No, that's not at all. I would find that awful. But the, and when I realized that, I realized, corporations are concerned about questions in general, because it starts to get strangely political, which also goes back to Surrealism. And when reading Buñuel, he said that all of the people involved in Surrealism that were the official capital S Surrealists, if they looked forward, as the young people they were in Paris in the 20s and 30s, look forward to seeing that they had paintings in museums, plays, books published, art in museums, what have you. They would all movies made, they would all universally consider themselves failures, because what the Surrealists were was a political group. They were not an art organization. And
not like a capitalist kind of with consumerism sort of in mind.
Well, they wanted to change the world. There in the 20s and 30s in Paris, there were all these different cafes, and one cafe would have one kind of political group meeting, say the communists. Another would have the fascists. Another would have the anarchists. Another would have the social democrats, what have you. And they all talk passionately about their points. And one of those cafes was the Surrealists. It was a political group. It just so happened that it ended up turning into an arts organization, a kind of a school of art. But that wasn't their intention.
I see
and
that.
I've read there's a couple Surrealist manifestos, and they're really confusing, really, really purposefully so. But I would love to sit and talk to them in that cafe now, and if any of them could, I don't speak French. If any of them were, I'm sure many of them were conversant in English, but so anyhow, there is a political underpinning to it, but this goes to the corporate. For me, that's not necessarily what they were thinking about, but to me, what I recognize is in the United States, corporations have a legal obligation to their shareholders.
Of course.
So if they did something that was against the interest of their shareholders, it would be illegal, essentially.
Yeah.
And a corporation that owns a distribution and or film production, if it's a film production or distribution corporation, if there are questions in the film that ultimately lead to questions about corporations themselves, because the United States in the 1700s, what we call corporations now, was illegal. What we're so enmeshed in corporations, we don't even think about it. But it was totally illegal. In the 1700s, for something, they didn't even call it a corporation. I don't know what it was, but some kind of company. They needed to get permission in order to, from the government, to form the business that would make whatever product it was. And it would be allowed for a certain amount of, and the government would say, have to review it and see if this was okay for society or not. And then they, if they agreed that it was okay for the US, people, government, what have you, then they would be allowed to do it for a certain amount of time, a year or two, whatever it is, and make a certain amount of money, and then it would be disbanded. And that pattern had to keep repeating itself, but the US original government knew it could be damaging and it could become a tyranny the way it has become a tyranny.
Well, what I was getting at with the idea.
I'm sorry. I know I'm talking too much, but just the last thing is that, so the reason that I didn't distribute, this was the original point that I was going for. The reason that I haven't distributed the film is, for one thing, the film is. It has, the theme of it is dealing with that which isn't supposed to come out isn't supposed to be dealt with in corporate interests. Another word for that on some level would be taboo. So there's things that, now when I first came out with the film, the word cancel culture wasn't around, but I was aware that what I had in the film is precisely what cancel culture is about.
It could lead to boycotts, bad press.
Exactly.
Which could end up being financially devastating.
And even without it being digitally distributed, that people severely question me, which I understand. But that's also why when I was editing it, I saw then another filmmaker who I hadn't been as familiar with as I had with Buñuel before, but I watched him around that time, was Werner Fassbinder, who many of his films have sociopolitical extrusions from simple human needs. It's fascinating. I don't know of another filmmaker that does that. And I was aware that I was aspiring toward Buñuelian capital S surrealism, and even some Dadaism, which predates surrealism in the first film. What is it? But that meant that the containment of the film doesn't have things in it which is an important part of surrealism. It doesn't explain. It doesn't even put anything in context. So I knew, because then I was watching Fassbinder, which do have containments with them. They're fascinating structures. Some of them have a surrealistic aspect, but it has something much more political, but also emotionally complex. Amazing filmmaker. But I realized I needed to keep the film in a context of the question and answer session. The name of the title is a question, and because the film is about questions being denied from audiences, essentially, and also there were actors, most of the actors having Down syndrome, playing characters that did not necessarily have Down syndrome. I knew that could be taken out of context. And with the way the nature of the internet is that it could be then people making random comments, which I really didn't want, because that was not the purpose. It was not the purpose to make fun of anybody. I'm still very concerned about the imagery and things not being taken out, which if you put it out digitally, there's a thing called fair use. But by the fact that I've never put it out digitally, there is no such thing as fair use, and people can be prosecuted, which I've never done. But if it really came to it, I am sincere about that. The film, when I tour around with it, it's also not rated, so no one under 18 is allowed. It's an adult film in the context of of adult thinking. Anyhow, I'm talking too much about that. That's the thing. It's a can of worms. That when I do the Q&A for that film, it goes an hour and a half. The new film, which I have the first Q&A for, it was comfortable to have an hour-long Q&A, and I should be talking about that. I know you can edit this. I didn't mean to take all your time.
Will not do that.
Yeah.
But getting back to the kind of idea of corporations, watching this movie, AI is big in the cultural discussion right now, in the arts and also business, and basically is how it's going to affect society and humanity. And watching Know You're Wrong,
Or spooky action.
or Spooky Action at a Distance, yes, I thought to myself, there's no way that an AI program could make this movie. It is so very specifically a handmade, soul-crafted piece of art. However, I wanted to get your thoughts on artificial intelligence, if you have any concerns about it for even independent creators, if that would affect them. And one thing, I was talking about this on a podcast last week. I know this might be sensitive, but I know with the Back to the Future 2 situation, the studio put in a likeness of you, and you had not agreed to be in that picture. As far as
Not just a likeness. They used the cast of my face, and it's always downplayed by, specifically by the producers that did it. They always try to use different wording and stuff. They'll say likeness. No, they use the molds of the cast of my face to put it onto another actor, to fool audiences to believe that I was giving that performance. That's what's just now, the worst part of it. I shouldn't talk about this because then this gets cut out. I'll refrain. So go ahead.
Well, but because the person I was talking to, we were talking about AI and how there are now digital actors and actors whose estates have licensed their likeness so they can be reborn into new performances.
That's legal.
It is legal,
Yeah.
but I kind of question the morality of it, because in a similar situation, it wasn't a digital likeness, but in your case, it was a cast mask and a performance that you had not agreed to.
Well, that's what's illegal.
Alive.
That's what's illegal. Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean, I've seen specifically Bob Gale trade a cartwheel, saying nothing was done. Whatever.
But I'm just wondering, do you see
it's foolish?
Is this sort of a battle that you had fought like 30 years ago in terms of actors' rights to their own likenesses and persona in
it is what the lawsuit had for sure. But what's worse, and this is why I shouldn't talk about it because this is another can of worms, but what's worse is then utilizing my persona for them to talk about, for their perspective. It's of me to hurt me, to damage me, because they did something illegal. So they want to say, oh, it's because of him. So they've been for decades, and then people believe this stuff. And that's what's horrible about it. That's the hell of why, yes, it was good that Screen Actors Guild struck about that issue. And from what I can tell, they did it properly. The thing is, yes, if you've licensed it, that's fair. That's legal. And what they did with me was illegal. There was no contract ever about what they did.
So in terms of from your perspective, as long as it's a signed kind of agreement, even if it's like an estate of somebody, the person is passed on, they can't, I don't want to be in that Coke commercial.
Well, it is what an estate, like Marilyn Monroe, I believe. It's curious that she had a will because she was quite young, but apparently, from what I understand, her will was to Lee Strasberg and family, so they control the imagery for commerciality of Marilyn Monroe. And apparently they've done, I think she's the most she has the highest paid estate for her image use. But that's up to the person. If she, I don't know all the details of it, but I that's what I've understood, that she had a genuine will. And for me specifically, it's that there are people with that. There's two levels. I shouldn't talk about this so much.
Well, not necessarily like litigiously. I'm just thinking of you as a creator. Where do you kind of come down on this? Or
well, as far as artificial intelligence goes, as long as it's used ethically, it could be amazingly great. But if you use it unethically, then no, it's really, really hellish. And I have dealt with that hell. It's really not fun, no matter what anybody thinks. And no matter how I express it, nobody really understands how hellish it is, because it's ultimately taking you, not only for the performance, then people believing you're doing things I would never do. I mean, and then it puts me in the hell of, then I have to be critiquing another actor playing me, essentially, doing things that I wouldn't do. And of course, then that actor would take it personally. Then he wants to continue saying bad things. It's this cycle of hell that is, I shouldn't talk about it, because then there's already so many clips of me talking about this, and I just look like this guy who's always talking about this thing because that's what people want to cut out because the film's big. So I really shouldn't talk about it anymore.
Well, I respect that. I also respect this movie and what you've done with it, and I'm encouraged as I open this conversation. I haven't seen your other films. I'm definitely going to seek them out. So, Crispin Hellion Glover, thank you very much.
Well, thank you as well. I can't remember if there was something. It would be helpful to put for Know You're Wrong or Spooky Action at a Distance, or if people want to see me touring, really the best way is on my website, crispinglover.com or crispinhellionglover.com. There is a newsletter that people can sign up for, and it tells people when I tour with the films, and that's the best way, because it's hard to know exactly, because it's not a corporate thing. I toured for 15 years straight from 15 years straight from 2005 when I premiered What Is It in Sundance, and then 2007 premiered Everything Was Fine in Sundance, till 2020 when the pandemic happened. I toured every year, and then in 2020. I just toured in February, was my last show in 2020. Then the pandemic happened, and then I realized, well, I'll take the natural pause that this is happening, and I'll start touring again when Know You're Wrong or Spooky Action at a Distance is ready. And little did I know I would be in post-production for 5 years. The color correction itself took 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah, you can see that there was a lot, which was done.
Shifting, yeah.
It was done within the filmic world where you're shooting with film processing. So there's a lot. But anyhow, thank you. I appreciate the interview.
Well, thank you, sir.
All right.
All right.
Great.
Hey everyone, Ian here. I know, long time no see. But if you like the video you just watched, feel free to subscribe to Kicking the Seat right here, and also check out the playlist and recommended video right here. Thanks for watching.